If you guys have not been reading mainstream comics, you have no idea how bad they are or were. So when I say comicsgate should be selling 10 or 20 million dollars, I abso-freaking-lutely mean it. Cyberfrog and Bigfoot Bill should be $10 million each. I had the pleasure of reading Lone Star last night. The proof copy to check for grammatical issues. Oh, if you want to get a hold of me, click the links down below to join the Discord, send me email, or hit me up on Coffee or Patreon. I choose checking it for grammatical issues. The story was excellent. The art, as you can see, is great. The comic should have made $1 million. And I started to think about how much money the fighting has cost the creators in Comicsgate, and I actually started to feel sad. I have always read books and comics, but over the past 8 months, I have read hundreds and hundreds of comics. I have seen how well they sold on Comic-Con, so I have some idea about what a comic should be selling for. That's the thing. There are some gems in Comicsgate that should be huge books, much, much bigger than they are. Iron Sights, Ravage, Kill All Men, Lone Star, Bigfoot Bill, Cyberfrog, they should have sold 10 times as well as they did, and they did just fine. And don't get mad if I didn't pick your favorite comic. I haven't read everything in Comicsgate. I didn't have a chance to read Graveyard Shift or Red Rooster. I missed out. Well, I guess nobody had a chance to read Red Rooster, but I'm sure that's coming. If you go back before all the fighting, no names, as to who is responsible for 90% of it, and you extrapolate from that curve, I think channels should be several times the size they are now. The channels that have 100,000 subs now could have easily, 300,000 or more. People are out there, but people enjoyed clear-cut good guys and bad guys. Us versus Renfamous, Tim Doyle, Dan Slott. The people who are clearly SJWs. People didn't like it when Comicsgate started to go after other people who were roughly aligned with us. I know this is going to rustle some feathers, but the EVS-Vox split was a warning sign, because Vox was not an SJW. Love him or hate him, at least we're all right of center. Maybe Vox is slightly further to the right or left of some of us, but a lot of us didn't want to see fighting within the right and ignore the SJWs in the industry. So maybe Vox was the start of the decline. I'm sure there were people who were fans of Vox in Comicsgate who no longer felt welcome because of the bickering. Really, the more pragmatic thing for creators to do is just ignore fighting with someone that may cause your audience to be forced to pick a side. It set off warning bells. It wasn't a hard ping, but it was soft fuzz on the radar. Something was there. Fight the SJWs, not people who are vaguely on our side. Just because you have a personal beef with them, your personal fight is not Comicsgate's fight. And what are those? You never see those in comics anymore. Damn. Good for you, buddy. Then Nurkish had a humorous chat room in Discord, and some overly sensitive pussies got their panties in an uproar. Lighten up, walk it off, stop being a pussy. Then Tim Lim had a Trump comic that was apparently wrong-think, so he had to be deported back to Mexico. Hasta la vista, Tim. Then JDA and Chuck Dixon, because they worked with Vox, so they were haram. And Sachi and Douglas Ernst, because they worked with Tim and Nurkish. All of these wrong-thinkers had to go. Then Captain Cummings said, "Hey, what the hell happened to Comicsgate? Why are we gatekeeping?" So EVS declared Captain Cummings a wrong thinker and sent him to the cornfields. Then EVS banished Engeltine from I Love Comics and Tristan from Nerdette's newsstand because they think free expression is a good thing. Then he had to banish Mike Miller for his religious belief of pride is a sin, and Doug TenNapel had to go also because he was the wrong kind of Christian. Only atheists and quiet Christians are welcome in Comicsgate. Don't get me wrong, Doug can be a bit weird, and I wish he would wash his hands. But he's welcome to Comicsgate and be as religious as he wants. Oh, and Edwin Boyette got on EVS's wrong side. Because reasons? I think that had to do with hair jealousy. I think I'm seeing a theme with Mike. Dude is definitely a fan of the mammary glands. Anyway, the The weird thing is EVS and Edwin are the same age, but EVS's head looks like a cancer victim who narrowly escaped the fat farm. He definitely beat anorexia. While Edwin has his luxurious locks and enjoys exercise. How do I say this? I'm not going to say that. I'm just going to leave that part out. My point is that I don't think that this fighting has benefited, it's killing me not to say it, comicsgate projects. Oh, you're just salty. Cyberfrog is going to hit 1 million plus. I already said that Cyberfrog should be a $10 million campaign. EVS is one of the best comic book artists in the world, in my opinion. EVS should have 500,000 subs by now. He is very, very entertaining. And if it wasn't for all the fighting, which he has a large part in, comicsgate would have been huge. Instead, just as comicsgate was catching fire, all the fighting started scaring away customers. And you always want to think of these people not as followers or subs or fans, customers. They're all customers. There is good fights and bad fights. Good fighting is with the insane SJWs who wanted to destroy us. Bad fighting is with men and women who are roughly on our side. You don't need to micromanage every single aspect of comicsgate. Leave people alone. If you don't like their jokes or religious viewpoints, don't worry because you didn't say those things. You have no problem accusing people of using drugs, but you get offended when someone quoted the Bible. Doesn't anyone else see the hypocrisy? Okay, Mike Miller is clearly a man who loves big titties. I won't say it. People quote Jewish, Islamic, Christian writings every day. Quran 434 is probably appropriate for you. What does it mean when you have one guy fighting with 24 people? Are all 24 wrong? Or is the person in the center of the fighting a little bit of an asshole? Edit, quote, problem starter. Note to self, make sure you don't call him an asshole. Duly noted. Anyway, a few things about the Wu flu. First, F China. Second, doesn't it put things in perspective? People are dying from the Chinese plague, and you have a bunch of fat old farts arguing like teenagers with PMS. I hate to see brilliant things squandered. Lone Star, Ravage, Iron Sights, Bigfoot Bill, they should be multi-million-dollar projects. But they aren't because Comicsgate has slowed its growth radically. People don't like infighting over petty BS. And let me say that as someone who has kept tabs on Comicsgate from the beginning of its YouTube days, I know it goes back before that to Facebook, it's not all EVS's fault. It seems like everyone in Comicsgate has a habit of jogging through minefields. Never ever tell people to unsub from your channel. Those are the words of a crazy person. And if you're selling a product, don't block customers. Don't fight in public. In fact, don't fight in private. Just don't fight over things you don't need to fight over. But a fan of Nurkish said something offensive. Stop being a pussy. Change your tampon. Someone quotes a religious book. Big effing deal. You didn't say it. He isn't forcing the words out of your mouth. Ignore it and move on with your life. Have a beer, take a toke, and go back to laughing in Millionaire. My point is, I think all the creators in Comicsgate should be drowning in money, not just EVS. John Malin, Tenaple, Miller, the Brightwisers, Kanan White, Antonio, JDA, Cecil, they are all very talented, except Nasser. And they could all be getting their comics out to millions of people if they worked together. Can't we go back to crapping on Renfamous and Tim Doyle? Nothing personal, Ren. Take a fire hose to the gays, famous. I still think you're cute, even if you are a Nazi. Hail victory and sit on my face. Don't judge me. It seems like she is spurging out because someone is doing a cover for Doug Tenaple, who is literally Stalin. So let me get this right. Ren hates Doug and EVS hates Doug. So maybe, just maybe, Doug is not the bad guy here. People need to start distinguishing between people we don't like for personal reasons and bad people, i.e. malum prohibita, malum in se, or venial sins and mortal sins. Just because a few people in Comicsgate don't like Doug doesn't mean, and don't get me wrong, he can be hard to like sometimes, doesn't mean that the rest of us have to disavow him, right? Because it kind of seems like Comicsgate is stuck in an echo chamber. Okay, so this isn't just a puff piece, and this applies to Lone Star and Cyberfrog, where the artist is the writer. And Richard Meyer wrote 2 books, Jawbreakers and Ironsides. Oddly enough, this doesn't apply to him, because I think the difference is Meyer was much more humble in his writing approach. He knows he's not an expert writer or artist, so I got the feeling he was quick to have his stuff edited by other people. So oddly enough, it turns out the guy with the least amount of experience, Meyer, is a better writer than the 2 guys with 20 or 30 years of experience. It's kind of weird. Ironsides and Jawbreakers were very, very well professionally written. It was I was surprised when I read them and saw how tight the story was. Anyway, so both Lone Star and Cyberfrog have some minor problems. They're both better than the top 10 dozen books in Comicsgate are better than anything I've read from the mainstream in the past 2 years, or past several years. So these are just mild criticisms. Don't lose your freaking mind. I know artists are just the biggest thin-skinned pussies ever. So both Lone Star and Cyberfrog are overwritten. It's a case of amateur writers who are falling in love with the sound of their own voice. Irony, I get it. Both Ethan and Mike need to have someone who knows about storytelling to edit their work. When in doubt, less is more. Be on the lookout for trite, hackneyed, overused similes or phrases. When you see a wall of text, what is the point you're trying to convey? Now, how can you say it in the fewest amount of words? I think it's better when the artist is working for the writer, but at least consider hiring a real writer, Chuck Dixon or JDA, John Delarose. Which brings me to another point. The ability to work with people that you don't even want to barbecue with. Most adults, by the time they've reached 30, have learned this ability, and by 40 are masters of it. What's our goal? To create a good product and drown in money, weed, and whores. If we keep that goal in mind, it should help smooth over any rough spots. An example of brevity is the soul of wit. You got this scene where these 2 guys are on the couch with the Punisher shirt, and it's this huge wall of text. It's to say you're keeping her distant to keep, or she starts saying this whole thing about keeping her distant. These are like common tropes. I would just say this: you're keeping her distant to keep from hurting her. That's her decision, not yours, or something like that. You're expressing a very common romance trope. You don't need to explain it with all this detail. And this is what would have otherwise been a very, very strong scene. It's got a very strong ending. This is excellent, but the rest of this is kind of a mess. Lone Star asks the vampire, I take it you're Sarong, or whatever his name is. And instead of the Shakespeare quote about letting slip this mortal coil, I just keep it simple. I have been called that. I take it you are so-and-so. I have been called that. And then he says, this whole long text, oh, what a beauty it is that one. I have to say that you have very good taste. I would just cut that down to, oh, what a beauty she is, period. That's enough. This shortest distance. The thing is, you have this ancient vampire talking like a millennial. Give him dignity. He speaks few words, and they are important. He's probably 500 years old. And I wonder if you could have worked in an allusion to Sympathy for the Devil by the Rolling Stones. Pleased to meet you might be an example, where Lone Star says, Sarong, I take it you're Sarong. He responds, pleased to meet you. I don't know, that might be a little too cheesy. Keep it simple if you're an amateur like we are. The villain explains all his plans. It's not cliche at all. I would change that to the villain explains his plans, period. The vampire says, I imagine you think you know a thing or two about me, and goes into these long five boxes of just long going on and on. I would cut that all down to your hubris in thinking you comprehend me. In the pantheon of humanity, man is the lowest of his creatures, capitalized, meaning God. I am far greater than man and less than angel. Or something like, my kind is closer to angel than man. And you can change the rest of that wall of dialogue to, we are lions forced to hide from the gazelle. And you can skip this whole bit about we was kings. Because I know you probably didn't have that in mind when you wrote that, but that's what it comes off as. Anyway, I know everyone dipped out when I started editing. I love editing comic books. I've edited, I mean, not edited for real, but playfully edited two comics that people have sent in, and I love it, even though nobody watches the videos. It's surprisingly a lot of fun. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. If you guys want to support the channel, you can click the links, hit me up on Coffee, or send me a comic book, or just send me your art. Either biancazombie602gmail.com or hit up my P.O. box. All right, guys, I will see you all next episode.